Welcome back to our online sessions. Today we're going to start Block 2 of, of the course, The Structure of Modern English. This block focuses on morphology, which means we will look at how words are formed and how their smallest meaningful parts work. So today's sessions will take you through units 6, 7, 8 of Block 2. So before that, let me quickly walk you through what we're going to cover today. So we will begin with a recap and the breakdown of Block 2. That is units breakdown of Block 2. Then we will look at our learning goals. After that, we will move into the core topics of discussion: uh, structure of words, morphemes, types of morphemes, allomorphs, and finally inflection and derivations. We will end with your assignment and next steps. So now, uh, before we dive in, just a reminder. Uh, we have completed block 1, that is on phonology, which focuses on sound pattern of English. Now we shift to block 2, morphology. This block has units 6 to 10. So, but today we're going to deal with only unit 6 to 8. So that means structure of words, what a morpheme is, types of morphemes, allomorphs, and the difference between inflection and derivations. Uh, think of today as learning the building blocks of words. So now, what are the learning goals? So let's look at what we want to achieve by the end of the day, of today's sessions. Our goals are simple. First, uh, uh, I want you to be able to look at any English words and identify each parts. Second, you should understand what a morpheme is and what types exist. Third, you should be able to tell when a word is being inflected and what is being derived. And if you learn these things, you will easily analyze the structure of any English words. So by the end of the lecture, I expect you to actually perform this analysis, break words into meaningful units, and apply inflectional or derivational rules on your own. Okay. So next, let's move on to the definition of morphology. So morphology is simply the study of the internal structure of words. In phonology, we study about sound patterns, but sounds alone don't carry meaning. In morphology, we study the smallest meaningful pieces. So the question in morphology is how words are built. So every word you use is a combination of meaningful units. These are not random. They follow rules, and and the smallest meaning of and the smallest unit of meaning is called a morpheme. That is the heart. That is the core of morphology. So throughout this lecture, try to listen carefully. Words are made from the smaller meaningful parts. So now let's move on to unit 6, the structure of words. Now, when we talk about the structure of words, we are asking how a word is organized, right? So a word usually has 3 types of parts. So let me explain. Uh, First, root or base. This is the this root or base is the central core meaning of the word, or central element of the word. For example, in teacher, for example, let me give you an example from English word. The word teacher. Here, the root is teach, right? And a fix that is added, or that is, these are, morpheme, the bound morpheme. So, a fix attaches to either, root or base. So, teach is a root, and everything else attaches to this root or base is fixes or are fixes. Okay, so next is stem. Stem is like, it is the root plus any affixes that have already been added, or in simple sense, it is a part of the word that carries its main meaning, to which grammatical endings are attached. I will explain you further when I discuss about inflection of the about this. So, for example, again here, let me use the same word, teacher. As I already said, teach is the root, and then when you add er, that is affix r, that is creation of verb to noun, right? Teach is verb, teacher is a noun, so you can derive from teacher, that is, you can derive verb to noun. And when you try to pluralize this teacher, you need to add, or we have to add, the suffix sa, that is plural marker sa. So it becomes we get teachers from teacher, teachers. This is the example of stem. All right. So now, what are affixes? These are, bond morphemes. They are attached to a root or base. Affixes can be prefix, suffix, or infix. What is prefix? A prefix is something. It is a part that is added before the root. Right. For example, rewrite, write, rewrite. Happy, unhappy. And what about suffix? Suffix that is bond morpheme that are added after the root. For example, childhood, teach, or. The or is the suffix. Now, what are infix? Infix is, that is a morpheme that is inserted inside a base or a root. Like, for example, from English word, absolutely, when you say abso-freaking-lutely. See how another word is inserted inside a word, right? Abso-freaking-lutely. So this infix is actually quite rarely used in English, but prefix and suffix are quite productive. So you'll get many examples of prefix and suffixes than infix, because it is quite rare or less productive. Okay, so now whenever you think of word structure, try to think about roots, stems, or affixes. They are quite important in building words, right? So next is types of word structure here. So Here, the important idea is that words are not all built the same way. Some words are simple, having only one morpheme, and others are complex or even compound words, as you can see here in the table. So, what is our task? Our tasks is to recognize how many pieces a word contains and how those pieces fit together. Right? That is our tasks. So here I have there are some examples of simple words, complex words, and compound words. So as you can see here in simple words, it only contains one of free morpheme like book, play, doll, run, I, you, he, she, all these things. These are simple words. They cannot further be composed, or if you further break them, it will be the analysis of phonology. It's not all morphology, right? If you try to break book into smaller pages, that's not possible in morphology. So next is complex words. So complex words may contain can contain a root and one or more affixes. Say again, teacher, teach plus suffix r, teacher. Kind plus ness, kindness, just like that. So next is compound words. So that is forming of words, forming of new words by joining two free morphemes, two or more free morphemes. Like here, examples are given for two free morphemes, like sun plus flower. When you combine sun plus flower, you get sunflower. Like black plus board, blackboard. So two bases are combined, two or more bases. It can be more also, it can be two. So two bases are combined to form or to generate new words. Okay, so next is unit 7, that is the concept of morpheme, allomorphs, types of morphemes. So now let's begin with morphemes first. So a morpheme is the smallest meaningful unit in a language. So you cannot break it into smaller parts without destroying or without losing meaning, right? So for example, let's say let's take a word like a simple word like a pen. So the word pen is one morpheme. If you try to break it into P-E, none of those pieces carry meaning, right? It will be analysis, as I already said, it will be analysis of phonology. It will be phonological analysis instead. Sound, sound, analysis, right? So now, that's why you cannot decompose further. Right, morpheme cannot be decomposed or breaks into smaller parts. So now morphemes comes into two types. Or there are two types of morphemes. First is free morphemes. These morphemes, can stand alone as words. Look at pen, fast, green, run, you, he, she, do. Right. These free morphemes can stand independently. They don't have to be attached, or they don't have to attach to morpheme. They carry meanings on their own. Right. So they are complete words on their own. Okay. So that's the reason. Since they already have the key. Since they already have meaning, so they do not need any attached, right? Okay, so on the other hand, bond morphemes, cannot stand alone. They must attached, to a root or a base. So when you, say for example, when you see something like or ness, or sir, right? Remember, these are all bound morphemes. See, this un has to be attached to a base. Happy, right? Unhappy. Like for example, this re, the prefix re has to be attached to another base that is like rewrite, redo, something like that, right? And another marker, ed, ud, right? This has to be attached to a verb or other, base, right? Like talked, talked, something like that, right? So again, the suffix like student, students, something like that. And ness, again, kindness, happiness. See, they cannot stand alone. They carry meaning, but they cannot stand on their own. They have to be attached to base or root or a base. Okay. So next is allomorphs. Well, what is this? Now, this quite interesting because this are actually different variants of the same morpheme that do not change its meaning. Okay, like so, like the plural marker sa. This has three pronunciation variants. Okay, like look at an example here. Cat. When the in a word in a base, when the when a word ends with voiceless consonant, so it sounds like cats, right? Cats. But when this plural marker marker is attached to a word that ends with voiced sound, like here, dogs, dog. It sounds like zzz, like see, dogs. Instead of dogs, it sounds dogs, dogs, dogs. See, zzz sound, right? And again, another example, when a word ends with sibilant sound, like hissing sound, like something like that, so it is pronounced as is. Okay, see, like normally in our local pronunciation of this bas, like plural, plural of bas. How do you pronounce? Like bases, right? But it is actually pronounced as bosses, bosses, right? Houses, something like this. See? So now, again, another examples of allomorphs is the past tense marker, right? Same thing applies here. So like, see here I have given three examples again. Same, just like allomorph marker, the like plural marker allomorphs. Same thing applies to allomorphs, past tense, in some places it sounds t, in some places it is pronounced as d, in some places it is sound in some cases it is pronounced as right? See, work, see, worked, it is not worked, right? It is worked, work, worked, play, played, right? Wanted, wanted. All right, it's not wanted, it is wanted. Okay, so why? So we can say what we can say is here is that why do these differences happens? Because of the surrounding sounds. Okay, so English what's changes the sound to make pronunciation like much like easier, right? So it is all about, it is all due to phonological alterations. Okay, so next is unit 8, inflection and derivation. Let's start with derivations. So this unit, this unit focuses on mainly main two processes, major processes that modifies words, right? So first we have derivations. So derivations, derive derivations. What do you understand by this? So this means it creates, new words by adding affixes that may change or, maintain the word's meaning or word class. What is word class here? Word categories. They are parts of speech, like noun, pronoun, adjective, adverb, something like that. Okay. So what are the characteristics of derivations? So the first point is it creates new words, right? So next point is it can change the either change or maintain the grammatical category or grammatical class, or it can use either prefixes or suffixes, as you can see here in examples. Look at the basic, happy, adjective, beauty, noun, employ, verb. See how how new words are created from happy to unhappy, beauty to beautiful, employ to employment, right? By adding affixes. Okay. So next is inflection. Now, what is this inflection? Inflection, on the other hand, does not create words. It only adds grammatical, informations like tense, number, or degree of comparisons. All right. So in English, only suffixes are used. Okay, so as you can see here in the examples, for plural, toy, toys, zumped, big, bigger. So these suffixes, inflectional suffixes are used in three cases. One for plural, pluralization, tense, and degree of comparisons. All right. So now let's look at the comparison between inflection and derivations. So as you can see here, derivation creates new words, and inflection does not create new word, right? And derivation changes word classes, like verb to noun, noun to verb, right? Adjective to adverb, adjective to noun, something like that. But introduction does not change word classes; it maintains word class, right? So what about the meaning change? It is quite significant in derivation, but in terms of inflection, it is only grammatical role, right? As I have already shown in the previous slide, it is only used in numbers, that is pluralization, whether word is singular or plural, or it is used in tense, like in verbs, right? And next is degree of comparisons. Like okay, so here are two more examples. Like as you can see, what about the position first? Position in derivation, both prefix and suffixes are used, but in inflections, only suffixes are used. For example, kindness, right? Read. In read, you can use the prefix reread. That is to read again, right? Something like that. And in inflections, Student, singular student becomes plural students, right? By adding plural marker sir. So on derivation, you can see kindness, right? And in inflection, students. Okay. So next, these are the major processes or word formations in English. So uh, if you want to know more about English word structures or word structure, how words are really generated or formed, so you need to have a good knowledge of both in derivation and inflections. This will help you analyze English words, both simple, complex, and compound. All right. So, this is the main discussion of today's session or today's lecture. So now let's move on to the assignment for next class. So now, as you can see here, there are two questions. What is the definition of morphemes? And then types, and its types with examples. So you try to define morpheme. What exactly is morpheme? Okay, so I have already discussed about morpheme, right? So try to define morpheme and try to provide examples from English words. Okay, and try to solve this, and you share it with me via email or WhatsApp. And also, after defining morpheme, try to explain, its types. What are the types? Free morphemes and bound morphemes, right? So try to provide examples. Okay. Now another question I have given you is the distinguish between inflection and derivation with examples. So I have discussed about derivations, inflection. I have also shown you the differences. So take the idea, right? Do more research about inflection and derivations, and write it. What you have understood about these two with examples. Okay. So now let's try to summarize what we have covered in today's lecture. So today we have covered the building blocks of words, right? Like roots, stems, affixes, free and bound morphemes, right? And allobarbs, and how inflection and derivation works. Okay. So in the next class, we will move on to units 9 and 10 of block 2, where we'll look at how English forms through different processes, right? We shall dive deeper into how new words are created in English, in English language. Okay. So this is the introductory part of the morphology. Okay. So with this, we'll conclude today's sessions.